Let's talk about something a little provocative today. There's this idea that for some US states, decline isn't some problem way off in the future. It's already here. We're talking about an irreversible cycle, a kind of death spiral that's emptying out whole towns. It's a crisis happening in plain sight. But nobody really wants to talk about it.
So what is this death spiral? Well, think of it like a feedback loop from hell. It starts when people leave. That means less tax money coming in. With less money, you get worse schools, crumbling roads, fewer hospitals. And, when public services decline, what happens? Right, even more people leave, especially young people with options. The spiral just gets tighter and tighter, and it's incredibly hard to stop.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to look at 4 states, and each one tells a different part of this story, from industrial collapse to a full-blown environmental crisis. Then we'll zoom out and see why this is a quiet but definitely growing national issue.
First up, West Virginia. This state isn't just declining, it feels like it's collapsing. This is really the classic textbook example of what happens when a state's main industry just vanishes.
To really get the scale of this, just look at McDowell County. Back in 1950, this was a busy, bustling place with almost 100,000 people. Today, it's less than 20,000. Just think about that for a second. That's not just numbers, that's entire generations that have just packed up and left.
Negative 82%. That number alone just tells you the whole story. This isn't some slow leak, It's a catastrophic hollowing out. It represents vanished communities, boarded up businesses, and a landscape that's been fundamentally changed forever.
And here's the real kicker. This is the part that makes any kind of comeback almost impossible. The state is actually shrinking from within. It's experiencing what's called natural population decline. So even if nobody moved out, the population would still be getting smaller every year. That's a demographic hole that is incredibly difficult to climb out of.
So here you can see that death spiral in action, step by step. It all kicked off with the loss of coal jobs. That forced young people to go look for work somewhere else. Of course, that shrinks the tax base. The money that's left just can't support good schools and hospitals, which, you guessed it, drives even more families away. It's a vicious cycle that just feeds on itself. Okay, let's head over to Mississippi now, because we see the spiral building in a totally different way. Here, the problem isn't so much the collapse of one big industry, but more of a slow, grinding, hollowing out of its entire economy. You can literally drive through towns in the Mississippi Delta and see this with your own eyes. Places like Greenville, where factories shut down and farming became automated, their downtowns are just block after block of empty, silent storefronts. The economic heart of these places has just been ripped out.
And the consequences of this, well, they're pretty stark. Mississippi is consistently at or near the bottom for all the key metrics. Lowest median income in the country, some of the absolute worst health outcomes, and one of the highest poverty rates. And these aren't just stats on a page. They are real barriers to opportunity for millions of people.
And right here, this is the state's hidden vulnerability. Over a third of its entire state revenue comes from the federal government. This dependency is basically what's propping up essential services. So you have to ask, what happens if that federal money ever gets seriously cut? The state could face an immediate, absolutely catastrophic budget crisis.
This quote really gets to the heart of why nothing seems to change. It's politically impossible to just admit the truth. Can you imagine a governor saying, "Hey everyone, our decline might be irreversible"? It would be political suicide. So instead, the problem gets managed, but it never, ever gets solved, and the hollowing out just keeps going.
Now, our next state, Louisiana, wow. It faces a threat that's on a whole different level. It's not just an economic crisis. The state is, and I mean this literally, physically disappearing.
So according to the U.S. Geological Survey, Louisiana loses a football field of land every 100 minutes. Just let that sink in for a second. A whole football field, gone, every hour and a half. This isn't some slow, gradual erosion over centuries. This is a rapid collapse of its coastline that's happening right now.
And this has a very, very real human cost. Look at the community of Isle de Jean Charles. It used to be home to about 300 people. Today, there are maybe a couple dozen left. The island has literally sunk into the Gulf of Mexico, forcing its people, America's first climate refugees, to abandon their homes.
And these huge climate events like Hurricane Katrina, they just act as accelerators for the problem. After Katrina, the population of New Orleans just plummeted. And yes, some people came back, but a lot of the young people who left for stable jobs in places like Houston or Atlanta, they never returned. And really, why would you build your future on land that could literally be underwater in a few decades?
But look, this isn't just a story about the Deep South or Appalachia. Up in Illinois, we see a state that's basically splitting in two. You have one major city, Chicago, that's thriving, while these vast rural areas are collapsing.
Just look at this map of population change. It's stunning. 87 out of 102 counties in Illinois lost population in the last census. We're not talking about a few struggling towns here and there. This is a widespread demographic retreat across almost the entire state.
And for a really stark example, look at the city of Cairo, way down at the southern tip of the state. It used to have 15,000 people. Today, it's about 1,700. It's become a town of vacant buildings and empty streets, a shell of what it once was, where young people just get out as soon as they possibly can.
So you might be asking, why can't the state government just step in and help? Well, because Illinois has its hands tied. It's dealing with one of the largest public pension debts in the entire country. There's simply not enough money to go around for the kind of massive rural investment that would be needed to even begin to turn this around.
Okay, so let's zoom out. West Virginia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Illinois, these aren't just isolated incidents. They're like the canaries in the coal mine for a much larger and much quieter crisis that's unfolding all across America.
These same patterns, population loss, young people leaving, a shrinking tax base, they're starting to show up in other states too. We're seeing it in parts of Kentucky, Alabama, Ohio, Missouri, and Arkansas. They're all on a similar path, entering the early stages of that exact same death spiral. And the reason this crisis stays so silent is because, just like we saw in Mississippi, no politician can afford to admit how bad the problem really is. So they talk about small ball solutions, a little grant here, a tax incentive there, but they completely avoid the massive structural problems because, honestly, the truth is just too bleak.
Look, this isn't really a prediction. It's more of a description of what's already happening. The cycle is in motion, and it is incredibly difficult to reverse. Which leaves us all with a final, pretty unsettling question to think about. How many more communities have to empty out before this silent crisis finally becomes a national conversation?